live. This is going to be episode 3. Please remember this is a public broadcast, and hit like on our Facebook page. You can also find us at unknownphilosophers.com. I'm Briggs Cunningham, your host today from Chandler, Arizona, and I have with me my co-host, Master Chef Cosmo Magli. Ozzy, what's up, my brother? How are you doing?
Good, brother. I hope we're gonna have a great show today. I'm looking forward to it. We have a great guest today, guys. Our guest today is Christopher McIntosh. He was born in England and he grew up in Edinburgh, Scotland. He brings us a lot of different studies on philosophy, politics, economics at Oxford and German and London University. That's where his alma mater is. And he wrote many books on Rosicrucianism and a few non-fiction covers and few fictions. He's kind of broad spectrum of different types of writing. Today he'll be talking about the revival of Rosicrucianism. So it's going to be a fun show, and I hope you guys will enjoy it. And with no further ado, I would like to introduce our guest today, Brother Christopher. How are you doing today?
Fine, thanks. Good to be here.
Christopher, how are you doing? Christopher is broadcasting from Germany. How are we doing in Germany today?
Oh, pretty well. We're surviving these troubled times, more or less okay. I hope you are too.
We're doing great. It's great to be on a Saturday to that's all we hear about right now, and it's great to just take a break and discover some things together today on Rosicrucianism. So let's go ahead and let's get into our topic, Christopher, the Rosicrucian legacy and its relevance today.
Thank you, Briggs. Well, I hope you're all well and surviving these difficult times okay. To be holding a discussion about Rosicrucianism online actually strikes me as being quite appropriate, because if the early Rosicrucians were alive today, I'm sure they'd be making full use of all the latest information technology. You may remember that in the Fama Fraternitatis, when the Rosicrucian brethren discovered the burial vault of Christian Rosenkreuz, one of the things they found was a minutus mundus, a miniature world. And in a short story of mine, in a collection called The Sorceress of Agartha, I rather playfully suggested that the minutus mundus was in fact a computer connected to the internet. But that was just a playful suggestion. Well, coming to the theme, the Rosicrucian legacy and its relevance today, the question arises, what is the Rosicrucian legacy? Well, clearly it's a multifarious legacy whose influence can be seen in many different areas, in the arts, literature, music, science, in the number of organizations today using the name Rosicrucian, and of course in Freemasonry. In fact, it has been argued, notably by the English 19th century writer Thomas de Quincey, that Freemasonry is basically a continuation of the Rosicrucian movement. At any rate, there's certainly a symbiotic relationship between the two. So the question arises, regarding the significance of the Rosicrucian legacy is particularly relevant for Freemasons. So what legacy are we talking about? Well, I'd like to focus on one particular passage in the Fama Fraternitatis, the key text of the Rosicrucian movement. The opening paragraph declares that a new age is emerging in which God has, quote, caused certain highly illuminated minds to come forth who might partially renew the arts which have become debased and imperfect, so that finally man might understand his true nobility and splendor, unquote. And a bit further on, there's a passage indicating that the aim should be to create, quote, a perfect development of all the arts, unquote. A perfect development of all the arts. In other words, it was a holistic vision embracing religion, science, the arts, and every area of human culture. Well, that passage could equally well apply to the present age. The arts which have become debased and imperfect. How true that is today when one thinks of the things that pass for modern art, like an unmade bed or a pile of old junk or a pickled horse's head in a glass tank. And when one thinks of modern architecture, well, never before have we had so much technical capacity to create beauty, and yet everywhere in our towns and cities we're surrounded by ugliness. Now, here's where Freemasonry has potentially an important role to play. Among the important symbols in Freemasonry are three pillars of the Ionic, Doric, and Corinthian orders, representing the principles of wisdom, strength, and beauty. All of them are important. You have to build wisely, you have to build strong enough to last, and what you build should be beautiful. Now, in the days of so-called operative masonry, these were principles to be applied in the practice of architecture and building. In speculative masonry, so-called, they became metaphors for moral and spiritual development. But I would argue that it's misleading to think of speculative masonry as somehow superior and more spiritual than operative masonry. In fact, working with stone is spiritual. Stone is alive. I'm a sort of amateur stone carver myself. And stone carving is a kind of alchemy. You're taking a piece of raw stone and conjuring something beautiful out of it. Now, at this point, I'm going to show you a few pictures. So in Scotland, where I grew up, Freemasonry has retained a much closer connection with the operative craft than elsewhere. There's a Scottish Mason, Brother Robert Cooper, who's done a lot of research on this topic. This is something that goes right back to the beginning of Freemasonry in Scotland. So, for example, here is James Craig, the architect who planned the new town of Edinburgh, where I grew up, as I said. He was a Freemason, as were most of the architects and builders who worked on the new town. And that's one of the reasons why Edinburgh is the beautiful city that it is. But no one builds cities like Edinburgh today. As I said, our cities are mostly bleak, ugly places devoid of beauty. So we need to reconnect with the Masonic idea of beauty, and in a practical way. Here's another city with Masonic connections, Washington, D.C. Pierre L'Enfant, the French architect who designed the layout of Washington, was probably a Freemason, and certainly many of the architects and stonemasons who worked on the important buildings of Washington, like the White House, were Freemasons, largely from Scotland, because the Scottish Masons were known as the masters of classical architecture. Here's an interesting figure, the English architect Sir John Soane, who lived in the late 18th and early 19th century. He was also a prominent Freemason. And here he is in his Masonic regalia. And on the right, you see two of the houses that he designed, Tyringham Hall in Buckinghamshire and Moggahanger House in Bedfordshire. And he also designed the interior of his own house in London. As you can see, he was a great collector of sculpture. This house is now a museum. It's very close to Freemasons Hall, and it's well worth a visit when you're in London. Now, here's another person that I admire, Rudolf Steiner. the founder of anthroposophy. Steiner was also a Mason, albeit in an irregular lodge of the Memphis and Mizraim system, and he was a Rosicrucian. At least he regarded himself as working in the Rosicrucian tradition. Now, for me, what's really significant about Steiner is his insistence that spirituality shouldn't just float up there in some ethereal realm, but should be brought down through the hands into the physical world. And he did that in many different ways, through his biodynamic agriculture, his homeopathic medicine, the Waldorf schools, the eurythmy dance method, and the architectural style that he developed. So for me, Steiner is someone who perhaps comes closer than any other modern figure to fulfilling that holistic Rosicrucian vision, a perfect development of all the arts, as the farmer puts it. So what can Freemasons take from Rosicrucianism today? Here I would like to draw an analogy with alchemy. Some people regard alchemy as essentially a symbology representing a psychological or spiritual process. But in fact, alchemy has always been a dual process. There's a spiritual side to alchemy, but there's also the physical work in the laboratory, and the two complement each other. So one can imagine the same kind of complementarity in Freemasonry. Lodges that wish to do so could develop a closer relationship with the practical domain of architecture and building, as at the time of the Scottish architects and masons who built Edinburgh. Now, of course, there's a magnificent tradition of Masonic lodge architecture, but that's specific to the design of lodges. So let me try to sum up what I see as the Rosicrucian message for the way forward. Let's just compare the era of the Rosicrucian manifestos with the present day. There are many parallels. There's the same feeling that something has gone seriously wrong with the world. When we look around, we see divided societies, wars, mass migration, environmental destruction, cities that are devoid of beauty, the arts mostly adrift without any real spiritual content, not to mention pandemics like the one we're suffering from now. At the same time, as in the 17th century, there's the feeling that science and technology offer enormous possibilities to create a better world if only we could use them in the right way. So I think the essential message of the farmer needs to be repeated, that we need to bring spirituality back into science so that the scientist works in a spirit of reverence, as the alchemists did. We need to have a medicine that treats the whole human being, an education that develops the whole human being. We need to have the kind of art that uplifts and inspires us, and an architecture that reflects divine principles, and apply it in our towns and cities, and also in our gardens and parks, because the great architect of the universe is surely also a garden architect. And a number of the great landscape gardens of Europe were created by Freemasons. Here's just one example. The new garden at Potsdam, near Berlin, created by King Frederick William II of Prussia, who was a Rosicrucian and a Freemason. And here you see an ice house, one of the features of the new garden, in the form of a pyramid, a common Masonic symbol. And over the doorway on the right is a set of alchemical symbols, because King Frederick William was also an alchemist. And here I'd just like to mention my own modest contribution to the tradition of the symbolic garden. I don't have the means to create a great park like King Frederick William, but you can apply the same principles in a pretty small garden. So what I'm trying to do in our garden here in Bremen, near Bremen in northern Germany, is to create a garden of the mysteries through carefully placed reliefs in stone and wood, most of which I made myself. Here are just a few examples. On the left, a relief of an owl sacred to the goddess Athena with an inscription in German that invites the visitor to look around with the open eyes of the owl and the wisdom of the goddess. And on the right, a stork, an important creature in the Nordic mythology, with a German inscription that says, "To the herald of spring and the bringer of life," a reference to the tradition that storks bring children into the world. On the left here, a green man for the Celtic mysteries. I didn't carve this one myself. I bought it from a dealer in England. And on the right, a stele dedicated to the Greek god Pan with an inscription that says, "Pause and listen to Pan's Arcadian pipes." And here, a circle of stones inscribed with runes, the ancient alphabet of the northern peoples. And finally, a phoenix arising from the flames. This is a well-known alchemical symbol, a symbol for transformation, but I also see it as a symbol of hope. Hope that whether we're Freemasons or Rosicrucians or whatever, we can help to bring to life again the holistic vision of that Rosicrucian circle in Germany 400 years ago, that vision of a perfect development of all the arts. So I think that's an appropriate note on which to end my presentation. So I'll stop there and hand over to the discussion.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Christopher. That definitely gets us started. Doing my own research into Rosicrucianism and some family connections coming over from Germany, the first thing I think about is just our freedom and the seeds that these men planted so long ago, our freedom of the way we want to worship. Yeah. And the freedom of the sciences, and like you said, the arts, and the freedom to be able to develop them. Yes. Is something that in my own country here in America, I can't. Anytime I read the Constitution or even the Declaration of Independence, I have to think of those men back then when they were pasting these letters on doors and just. Yes. I wonder if they knew just by chance in the year 2020, we would be having a discussion like this. And if they could look down, I'm sure they're smiling right now and saying, "Go, frauders, go."
Yes, yes, I think they'd be surprised and pleased.
Cosmo, how about you? And then anybody else that has questions? I think there's a little way in there. You can raise your hand or just one by one, just undo your mic and ask Christopher a question, and looking forward to it. I'm going to mute off here, guys.
I did want to bring something out, guys. I had the opportunity to go to Scotland and England my first trip was in 2017 and my second trip last year. And got to spend some time with a brother out there, Jeffrey Spence, which Christopher, I don't know if you know Jeffrey. He's over at Roslyn.
No, I don't know him.
Yeah, he actually opened up my mind into looking further into the stones and the operative side of masonry, because you're right. What you did today is you just basically confirmed that what he's been working on for the past 20 years.
Oh, really?
It's there. I mean, it is. And particularly when I saw the Green Man imagery in that stone that you purchased, I saw a very similar figure at Roslyn.
Really?
It's hidden, but it's all over Edinburgh. I know that because he showed. Jeffrey actually showed me a map of where everything is. He says, next time you come down, we'll take a tour and I will point out all the sites where the Green Man is seen.
Yeah.
And I want to say maybe those were markers for ley lines. I don't know if you wrote this, Christopher, or somebody else, but even there's a broken image of Hermes on one of the walls in there, and that's where one of the major ley lines come in. So they were very aware of the energy in the earth. And I think, Cosmo, didn't you test that? Didn't you operatively test the energy there?
I did. I tested it at Roslyn Chapel underneath the vault in a certain section. Jeffrey pointed out we actually did the test both times I was there. And it's an amazing phenomenon, but it's natural. You know, it's part of the earth, it's part of the universe, it's all there. So it was really interesting to experience that. I really enjoyed it. I can't wait till I go back the next time and explore further, further research there.
Brother Jason,
Cosmo, how do you test that?
Yeah.
Brother Cosmo, you're on mute.
you're on mute, Cosmo.
There you go. Basically, the way we tested it was Brother Jeffrey had me remove my pendant. I was wearing a Masonic pendant at the time, and I had my hand out, and he was holding it steady, so it didn't move. And as I was staring at the pendant, basically he said, "Tell it to move with your mind." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, tell it to move," and I did, and it started moving, and it started basically swinging. And it got faster and faster. And then he told me, he said, "Tell it to stop." And I did. And it just came to a dead stop in the middle.
Really?
And happening, I felt this basically goosebumps coming in from your shoe all the way up to my head, back of my neck. It was an amazing feeling. And we had another brother that came out last year. He did it. And he was just like, "Wow, what just happened?" And he's young in the craft, so this really kind of opened his mind a little bit to look further as well and start doing a little more research. So,
Fascinating.
Anybody else have a question?
Would you mind expanding on the Green Man? I'm unfamiliar with that.
Well, the Green Man is a symbol that one finds in Celtic mythology, but also in other mythologies. It represents basically the creative, the male creative force in nature. So that's what it represents. And you see it all over the place. There's also a female counterpart, the Green Woman, and you find images of the Green Man and the Green Woman, for example, on churches. You find them on churches all over Britain and all over Europe. Very powerful symbol. I think that's all I can say about the Green Man right now.
I have I'd like to segue into a brief thing that Brother Briggs said about the ley lines and with the pyramid positionings being attached to these ley lines. Could you expand a little more on maybe the current state of ley lines? This is the first time I've heard it being brought up in Masonic discussion. I've done a lot of talk through yoga meditative circles that I've been with, talking about the planetary chakras. For example, maybe the root chakra being in Australia, crown chakra being Mount Shasta, and like that the third eye chakra of the planet can kind of move in a way. So what I would love to hear any insight on ley lines.
I haven't done a great deal of work on ley lines. I've studied a little bit the ley lines in Britain, and there was a British writer and archaeologist, you could say, Alfred Watkins, who he wrote a book called The Old Straight Track, examining the ley lines of Britain. And there are some very interesting ley lines. One that I've actually followed myself, part of, is one that goes from East Anglia in the east of England all the way down to Cornwall, and it follows the sites associated with the Archangel Michael. So, for example, it goes through Glastonbury, where you've got Glastonbury Tor with the chapel to St. Michael on the top, and right down to St. Michael's Mount in Cornwall. There are other such examples in Britain. There's no doubt that these ley lines exist, and sometimes there are there are also negative ley lines, at least so it is claimed, and it's possible to counteract these negative ley lines.
So
But,
could we almost say things like, the walk of Jesus Christ through his crucifixion, or juxtaposed to the Trail of Tears here in the West, all being positive or negative ley lines?
Yeah, that could be, yes.
That's fascinating. Thank you.
Mm.
Yeah, I could share just a quick story on ley lines. I was looking into it in my 20s. I had a friend. We're in Arizona, so we have Sedona. And he took me back into an area where there was a river, and he was explaining to me that just the magnetic field there is different. It's not magic, it's science. And he doesn't, maybe there's minerals underneath or what's going on. But he took me to a river spot, and he goes, get down on your knees and just put your hands out. And I put my hands out, and I could feel pressure. I could feel a magnetic pressure in the air. And so there he got my belief. Okay, I get it. He says, vibration organizes matter. I'm like, okay. And then he took me to Bell Rock, where we sat. I don't know if it's a high frequency or low that you're looking for, but we sat there and we went into meditation, just quieted our minds, became nothing. And you could feel it is different. It is. You can probably weigh it with some type of scientific scale of what's going on there. And I look at some of the Templar structures and cathedrals, and they were aware of these lines. So I wonder if more research should be going into that. A lot of the Hindu temples as well. What are they for? Can they be used for health? Maybe. I don't know. Anybody else?
Hey, actually, if I may, just real quick, in that idea of magnetics, because I think that is a perfect scientific explanation for that. And I've had this ongoing theory recently that the Earth, the world, plants, and people have bioelectric magnetic frequency that is always intimated and exchanged. And the world and technology that we built around us is a synthetic electromagnetic environment that is trying to operate within it, but we haven't identified that could necessarily be a cause for stress or unexplained energy just because of the power of it. And so having that exchange, and maybe these cities that are without the concept of beauty, wisdom, and strength could throw off the magnetic ley lines that we are currently existing in.
Yeah. Hey, Brother Greg, so to add to that too, for example, Washington D.C. is on it's on the 57th ley line, and that's what the number is if you look it up, according to Watkins' map. But in fact, Briggs and I we're actually planning a trip to Sedona as soon as we are able to actually test the same subject philosophy that I tested in Roslyn, and I want to do that in Sedona. So we're going to probably have a group go with us to experience that and do that. So yeah, it's just fascinating stuff. I mean, it really is.
That's what I love about this group and our speakers is we're all operative. We don't just read about it. We're like, let's go do it. Let's go check it out. What's going on over here? What are these guys writing about? And, Christopher, you brought up alchemy, and I'm an alchemist. There is an initiation in there. I mean, nature, if you're attuned to it, will walk you through it. You can know the stages of where you're at, and in certain ways you can start to pick up on that magnetic field, as well in those energies. And again, it wasn't magic. It is science. It's great to be able to talk about this stuff in 2020 and actually have pictures of it.
Yes.
Anybody else?
Brother Jason had his hand up before me, but I would like that after he's done.
No, I was just doing a thumbs up for something that Briggs said
Oh,
about us being more operative.
oh, gotcha. I tell you, I'm a thumbs up with what everybody said. I have a degree in chemistry and a passing interest in meteorology. And about 20 years ago, the theory of magnetic waves and weather patterns was just starting to float out and be explored. And we've actually established that there are magnetic waves that do interact with the weather patterns. We don't know the full effect yet, but I'm curious, has anybody done any research, or if you know of anybody who's done any research into the magnetic waves and the ley lines and cross-referencing them? That's a question.
That's a great question. I don't know. I'll have to look into that myself. What about you, Cosmo? Have you looked into that very much?
No, but I think our next guest, the future Mr. Scott Walters, might have something to say about that, because I know he's done some research on that. So
awesome.
How about you, Christopher? Up in the north, I mean,
Yeah,
that's
well,
where the
I can
gods
say,
are. I mean, have you tuned into some of that stuff up
well, I have a friend in Austria who told me an interesting story. Just near where he lives, there's a particular mountain that was a sacred mountain in the old religion. It's sacred to the Nordic gods, and at one point he had a visit from a group of Americans who were into Native American spirituality, and they decided to hold a ritual on top of this mountain and invoke the gods of the American Indians. And my friend Fred Lamond said he was watching from down below while they were doing this, and as they were preparing for their ritual, he saw clouds gathering. It was otherwise a clear sky, but clouds began to gather over this mountain. And when these people started their ritual, suddenly there was a downpour. So the point I'm trying to make is that weather responds to human activity and human thoughts.
We've got that great story of John Dee and Queen Elizabeth. You know about that story?
No, just remind me.
Somebody was coming to attack. I don't remember, it was Spain or somebody, and supposedly he did something, and there was a great storm and pushed him back.
Oh, yes.
Yep. I was also going to mention, when I study the alchemists, they all seem to have, and the places I have visited, we even have a place here in America, in Old Ambridge in Pennsylvania, where we have a grotto where the old alchemist Fred Rapp was. But even at the castle in Germany, where Saint Germain was, and those guys, they had a grotto. And I just keep running into these places where there's a grotto, and I'm wondering if those grottos were also specifically put in ley line positions, because it seems to be the place where they would go and pray and kind of like the Emerald Tablet, just focus, go up to God, get the wisdom, get the knowledge. Like what you said earlier, bring it down and then apply it to the earth with the action.
Yeah, I think that's quite possible that they did place those grottos on ley lines.
I have a quick question on maybe a way to find ley lines. I've heard of, the old Boy Scout thing of you hold the stick and the stick will water. Is there kind of a exercise or thing? Is it activating of our chi sense and things like that?
Well, I think there are different theories about how it actually works. I mean, one theory is that you tune into the earth energies. So if you're dowsing with a dowsing rod, the rod is reacting to the earth energies. But I tend to think that that the deeper levels of the human mind are basically in touch with the whole universe. So the dowsing rod is reacting to your knowledge that there's something there, whether it's a ley line or water or whatever it is you're looking for. I've experimented a bit myself with dowsing rods and had some success with it.
You can also douse with a pendulum, which is what Cosmo described.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I've used a
Correct.
pendulum as well.
Yep.
Mm.
Very cool. Yeah, I've done a couple, like, put myself in a very meditative, mindful state, very present. Definitely found myself at interesting parts of the house. I remember one time kind of like looking up and seeing this spiral from my house to a tree, to the moon, up to the stars. Just really a moment to drop into the environment.
Mm.
Yeah, Greg, one thing I would suggest testing out is I've done this recently is going to YouTube and finding some music that has that 7.8 frequency that hurts the same vibration I guess the earth makes. It's a certain tone. It's kind of like the ohm, it's basically that tone.
Yeah.
When you go into your meditation, let that sound go through your ear. One of the things I picked up from it just this week that it taught me was just to slow down. Now that I've been doing that meditation, I have that tone in my mind. I have the speed of that tone in my mind. And now while I'm doing things like getting ready for this morning, just nervous, because we really enjoy this show and everything to go great. But it was just, I went to that tone, that frequency, again, learning from nature, and just went, I'm going to go at that speed, and everything's going great.
I like that. Thank you.
I'd like to jump in here and maybe change the topic just a little bit. Christopher, I'm really interested in what you had to say about holism, and particularly you made reference to holism with regard to the sciences. I'm interested in your thoughts about the place of Sophia in the Rosicrucian tradition and how you might see Sophia as being particularly relevant to holism in the modern age.
Sophia, well, there are a lot of references to the Holy Spirit in the Rosicrucian tradition, the Rosicrucian writings, the house of the Holy Spirit, and so on. And the Holy Spirit is often seen as a female figure, and sometimes is identified with Sophia. And Sophia also comes into the Gnostic tradition because she's a sort of a mediator between the physical world and the spiritual world. So she plays a very important part in these Gnostically oriented traditions, and also in the Eastern Orthodox tradition. So your question is how the Sophia figure would apply to science. Was that your question?
Certainly science would be included, but I'm more interested in Sophia's role in holism, in our experience and expression of our spiritual nature, as Rosicrucians or not, in the current age, if there's something there.
I think I would say that she is a reminder of the importance of the female principle, because in mainstream Christianity, the female principle tends to be ignored, and but in the alchemical tradition, for example, in those alchemical images that you see in alchemical books, there's nearly always a man and a woman working together in the laboratory. So that's one way I would see this holistic principle operating. The male and female balance. That's what occurs to me immediately. Would you agree with that?
Yes, definitely. And I appreciate you making those comments. Yeah, for sure. And also, you know, just the connection, of course, between Sophia and wisdom in Wisdom, Strength, and Beauty.
Yes.
And Sophia also has a connection with beauty, of course, because most of us males idealize the feminine form as the embodiment of beauty.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I had somebody describe it as, you know, or at least in the alchemical text, when I look at it, it's kind of that spirit, that feminine spirit that moves in nature, that I try to pay attention to. It's not masculine. For an example, anybody who's ever gone camping, you're waiting for the sun to come up and you're in a beautiful area, right? And everything's quiet and you can hear that 7.8 hertz, that you can hear it. And, you know, the Egyptians always said the key was the sun, and I don't think they really worshipped it. They called it the aton, or atmosphere, spiritus mundi. It's that life force that's in the air, and you can see it when that sun comes up and it starts illuminating the forest. Everything comes alive. The birds start talking to each other. Hey guys, this is what we're going to do this morning. If you pay attention, nature just comes alive. The plants start moving, and I think because they watch nature like we do TV, they could see this stuff so much clearer than us. And when I see it, I'm in awe. When I could see it every morning if if I got up early enough.
Yeah.
So I think from a practical look at Sophia, I would say, you know, it's that tapping into that force in nature that is true and always works. It always works perfect.
Oh yeah.
Anybody else? I think Timothy Perez, did you have a question?
The Tübingen Circle was the circle surrounding Johann Valentin André, who was the author of the Fama Fraternitatis, or at least the main author. So it was that circle in the early 17th century which really started the whole Rosicrucian movement going. So there's many differences of opinion about the connection between that original Rosicrucian circle and later Rosicrucian movements, whether there is any continuity. I think the way I see it is, I would introduce the notion of the egregore, an egregore being a collective thought form on the invisible plane, created by many people thinking the same thoughts and focusing on the same symbols and ideas. And so I think I see the Rosicrucian movement as an egregore. It's an entity which you could say came into being in the early 17th century, and then was nourished and added to by later people who proclaimed the Rosicrucian message. So it's taken on a kind of life of its own and gathered an energy of its own, so that it's, when we look at Rosicrucian movements today, many of them wouldn't be recognizable to the people of the Tübingen Circle, but to me they're all manifestations of this egregore. So I think that's the way I would see it.
What a great question and answer. Thank you very much.
That kind of makes me think of the topic of a collective consciousness that's been coming up in whether it be through alchemy or just through meditation and yoga. And it's definitely becoming a mainstream idea of this collective thought pool that we're almost giving life to, and then takes on a life of its own. That sounds definitely.
Yeah, mastermind.
Mm.
Yeah, can you imagine having the collective thought? You know, you have, I don't know, John D. and Kelly and Bacon and Wren and all those guys.
Yeah. Mm.
You know, maybe they're meeting with Frederick V of Palatine at his castle in a secret lab, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Or King Rudolph's secret lab that they finally found in 2005 under the ground.
Oh yes. I've been to that place. It's amazing.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yes, it was quite extraordinary how that was discovered, because the river Moldau flooded, and one particular street was damaged by the floods, and they had to open it up, and then they found this complete alchemical laboratory under the street, and
Frozen
it's now
in time.
That is
frozen in time with all the old equipment, the flasks, and some of the chemicals, some of the substances, and it's now part of an alchemical museum. And it's an amazing place to visit, because you go in at the ground floor, and there's a sort of a shop front, and you go in, and you're taken into a back room, and then the guide, there's a bookcase. The guide opens the bookcase, and there's a secret door, and you go down a stairway. It's something like it's like something out of a Harry Potter film. You go down the stairway, and then you're in this amazing alchemical lab.
Wow, complete industry going on down there: glass making, makeup, metallizing, and then the tunnels down there were connected to all the trade routes. It was brilliant. It was
yes.
I found a record of it around 600 AD. It's one of the second oldest houses in Prague, and even in around 600 AD, which is pretty wild, it was known kind of like as a pharmacy. So you think alchemy. Rosicrucian is a medicine. I mean, they were all doctors. I mean, that's one of the things we agree to do, is to provide free medicine for those who are sick. We've got about 5 minutes left, guys. You know, we just had a book. We have a book club here, and we just went through the Rosicrucian manifestos, and I got to visit some of those. It was fantastic, and it seems as though that spirit in those books are kind of like today when I talk with my brothers, what's going on. We're all being vigilant of what's happening around us right now. And I always thought the Rosicrucians, you know, back then would more like to be public than secret. I think would maybe one of the differences. If they had the freedom to do so, like we do today. I don't know if anybody would agree to that, but I would just like to hear some wise words from you. You know, what can we do as Rosicrucians around this time from what we've learned from our frauders in the past? And then any other further questions, and we'll end, brothers.
Well, what can we do? Well, as I said in my presentation, I think we could start to try to apply this vision of a perfect development of all the arts, and maybe each of us could do that by in our own particular way. And my way of doing it is, well, partly by the books that I write, and partly by creating the Garden of the Mysteries, which combines visual art and poetry and horticulture. So that's my contribution. But I think we can each of us make a contribution according to our own particular talents and abilities.
I love that. That is so Rosicrucian. We're individuals, but together as one. But we're individuals. That's so important. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. Anybody else have any last questions for our guest?
Christopher, are you working on any new projects that you might want to share with us that's we're looking forward to? Any new material that you're working on?
Well, I'm working on some sort of thoughts and reflections, philosophical thoughts and reflections, which may at some point be publishable, but I don't know. I don't know yet. And apart from that, I'm working on our garden.
Nice. I have a question. Brother
Yeah.
Christopher, what is your most preferred way for us to order your books? Because I'm just now turned on to them and I would love to order them.
Oh, well, thank you. I think the simplest way is through Amazon.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Now,
Or-
how do I get past this Corona dark period and get over there and get an autograph? I'm just kidding. I'm teasing. But thank you very much. I appreciate that answer.
It is my hope we can bring Christopher out to the United States. He was recently in California. He's a member of one of the lodges there as well. And I had some brothers contact me and just said they just had such a great time with you. So we're looking forward to having you back for sure.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure being part of this discussion.
All right, guys. Well, we want to sincerely thank our guest, Christopher McIntosh. Again, you can find all of his work on Amazon.com. Just go to Amazon.com, type in Christopher McIntosh. He's got a lot of reading material on there. I've been following it for years. It was such a pleasure and an honor for me today to be online with you, and hopefully offline we can have some discussions. Wonderful person to talk with. Friday, May 8th, 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, we have Scott Walter coming on from America Unearthed. I think a lot of you guys have seen his show. And before we go, we'll have last words from Christopher and last words from Cosmo. This will be it for me. Best wishes, everybody, and we'll see you next time. And we'll let it end with Christopher and Cosmo.
Well, as I said, it's a great pleasure for me. This has been something of a new experience for me. I've given podcast interviews, and I've taken part in some meetings with friends and relatives over the internet. But this is the first time I've taken part in a discussion of this kind. So it's been great to be talking to kindred spirits, and I look forward to future occasions.